Okay, well, welcome everyone. Let's open with a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much that you have created us in such a marvelous way. It's just astounds me of all the things I learn and how you have created our bodies to heal themselves, and you've done all of these things, and I am just amazed, Lord, at all that you have done. And Lord, I just pray that you'll help us to learn more about this body that you have created and how we can do things to improve our health and work with the way you have created our bodies to work. And I thank you so much for this now. In Jesus' name, amen. Mm-hmm. So last week, actually 2 weeks ago, since we didn't have it last week, 2 weeks ago, I talked about, I read a little bit that was taken from a blog with an interview from a Dr. Garrett Smith. Was that helpful to any of you to understand a little bit about the bile and how that works? Was that something that was interesting to you? Okay. There's a little, I'm just going to read one little clip here, just a little thing here, a little bit more from him. It's on the misunderstanding of bile. And he points out what someone is talking about and how they're totally missing the point here. So it goes like this. Here we go again. You have a YouTube MD teaching us how bile is supposed to work. And let me warn you, it's not pretty. So according to this YouTube MD, he's quoting him now. Your body has a limited capacity for absorbing fat. You make bile from your liver that's stored in your gallbladder, and then that's secreted when you're eating fat. You have to emulsify the fat with the bile in order to absorb it. You can't really absorb fat otherwise. You can absorb a little bit, but some medium chain fatty acids. I think that your body's doing that for a reason. I think your body's making an amount of bile because it wants that much fat in return. Your body's very efficient. It's not just going to make a random amount of bile. Everything else is so tightly regulated and controlled, it just wouldn't make sense to me that was the one thing that just said, yeah, whatever, just make whatever you want. So either way, when you run out of bile, you're not really going to absorb fat, and so it goes out. And I think that's what keeps your stool soft and in a carnivore diet. You don't need fiber for that. It keeps it soft because you have a bit of excess fat, and I think that's how you tell you're just only eating meat and fat only, drinking water, not drinking coffee or artificial sweeteners that can act as laxatives. Then you can just look at your stool. If you're having dry, hard stools, that means your body's absorbing every ounce of fat that your body's eating. Nothing's getting out to keep your stool soft. So increase the amount of fat that you're eating. Okay. Then he says here, this doctor, he says, I don't mean to be rude, but I really have to ask, are they just making stuff up, or are they going along as they go along now? Is he saying that you should eat enough fat so that you can poop out more fat? Am I missing something? According to him, if you're getting dry, hard stools, you should eat more fat because your body is absorbing all the bile. There's a lot wrong with this idea of eating more fat so that you can finally go. One reason being how eating too much fat damages your gut microbiome over time. Researchers posting in the Journal of Functional Foods found that the gut microbiota can swing the host metabolic balance in energy homeostasis, gut motility, appetite, lipid and carbohydrate metabolism, and fat storage in the liver. The article also shared the long-term effects this can have. And he quotes, An impairment of the gut microbial population by a high-fat diet can lead to systemic inflammation and insulin resistance. But what does this have to do with bile and stool? The part of the study that says the gut microbiota can swing the host metabolism balance is key. Why? Because that's a major factor in dry, hard stools, or said another way, constipation. In a paper that's titled A Key Genetic Factor Governing Arabian Utilization of the Gut Microbiome Alleviates Constipation, scientists identified that, quote, Bifidobacterium longum impacts treatment efficacy against functional constipation. Remember how fat swings the host metabolism balance within the gut? What's happening is the extra fat in our gut is swinging against our bifidobacterium, the bacteria meant to help us poop. But do we really need all of this science to tell us this? No, not really. Constipation is an all too common reality for those following a carnivore diet. I don't know if your husband's having trouble with that or not, but.
Because they work through it as far as, when some people start it, they might see either extreme diarrhea or constipation.
Okay.
And he's been fortunate not to have either in extreme.
Good. That is good. That is good. And when someone says all you need to do is eat more fat so you can go, this is about as red as a flag can get for me. The YouTube MD is under the belief that bile is good because it emulsifies or absorbs the nutrient content of fat. But those following me for any length of time know fat-soluble vitamins are not the heroes we're told they are. If anything, they can plant toxins that slowly but surely cripple your liver and its ability to remove the toxins. I can't blame this guy too much, though. After all, he's just repeating what he has been taught in medical school and in the often made-up narratives found in extreme diet communities. Just know, toxic bile is bad news. Remember, last time we talked, there's two kinds of bile. There's the normal bile and there's the toxic bile. And the toxic bile has a lot of the pollutants in it, and it's very, very caustic to the system. And anything it touches, it can actually damage. That's the toxic bile. It's bad news for us. It's bad news for our guts. It's bad news for everything it touches, which is why it needs to get out of our bodies pronto. And for those who struggle to go and want to, well, I'm not going to get into this. He talks about another a supplement that he has called Sun Fiber, which is another fiber that we're going to talk about some other time, but not today. So I want to get back to this idea of our gut, because I think the gut is so important. In all of my studies, I've seen anywhere from 80 to 90% that they say of our immune system is in the gut. And so if we can get our guts healthy, then we are not going to be getting a lot of the sicknesses because our bodies will help protect us. So I want to get into this. How many have heard of Dr. Joseph Mercola? Okay? I'm going to read a little article by him that I found. And I'm going to skip the story at a glance and just go into it because I'm not going to worry about that. He says, What Lives in Your Gut is the title of this, and this just came out last week. It was one of his articles last week. The human gut is finally receiving the respect it deserves, and so are its trillions of inhabitants. You are, at your core, a microbial being. And while microorganisms are found everywhere from your skin to your mouth and even your blood, it's your large intestine where your body's largest bacterial ecosystem resides. If you treat it and the rest of your microbiome well, good health, both mental and physical, is likely to result. By nourishing this complex microbial community, You can even influence your gut-brain axis. How many have heard of the gut-brain axis before? Okay, only one? There is communication that goes on between your gut and your brain. Their messages go back and forth, back and forth. Years ago, I read a bunch of stuff and it was talking about how your gut is your second brain. Because not only can it send messages back and forth, they have found your gut can actually think. It can make decisions. It can do things that it astounded them. They had no idea. They thought the brain was the only thing that made any decisions and things like this. But they found some evidence that your gut can actually do some thinking. So they call it the second brain. Okay. So your gut-brain axis, which regulates digestion, mood, immune function, and so much more. So the number of microbes living in your gut is staggering. Your gut is home to bacteria, viruses, fungi, and a couple of things that are hard to pronounce, like archaea and eukarya. The latter two resemble bacteria, but are distinct groups of microorganisms. Bacteria, meanwhile, make up the vast majority of microbes in your microbiome. Three main phyla and groups of gut microbes make up the human microbiome and serve diverse structural, protective, and metabolic functions. And I'm not going to go into, I'm going to try to pronounce some of these. There's three kinds. Bacteroidetes, or whatever, I'm not sure. Then firmicutes and actinobacteria. I don't know how, I've never really heard those. The actinobacteria, one of those is the bifidobacteria, and I've heard about that since Jonathan's been born. They were really concerned about getting that back up because of the way he was born. The firmicutes include lactobacillus, which is in your, like milks, that kind of thing is a lot of lactobacillus and stuff. And the other ones I don't really know much about. So anyway, I'm going to go down. Broken down, the average person may host the following quantities of bacteria in different body regions. Remember, this is just an average. Your age, health status, diet, and environment all influence the numbers and diversity of the microorganisms in your gut. Your mouth, in your mouth, you have approximately 100,000 colony-forming units, or CFUs, per million, okay? The digestive process begins in your mouth when you chew your food, making it easier to break down in your gut. Your mouth contains an impressive number of microbes to maintain oral health, but if they become out of balance, disease may result. For instance, the bacteria in your mouth are thought to play a role in blood pressure via nitric oxide, a soluble gas stored in the lining of your blood vessels, called the endothelium. However, antiseptic compounds in mouthwash may destroy beneficial oral bacteria that are important for maintaining blood pressure, thereby contributing to high blood pressure levels. In one study, the use of the mouthwash twice daily was associated with a significant increase of systolic blood pressure after 1 week. While once the mouthwash was stopped, recovery from these resulted in an enrichment in nitric-reducing bacteria on the tongue. Differences in more than 10 species of bacteria lining on the tongue were noted after mouthwash use, including lower microbial diversity after 1 week of use. As noted in Frontiers in Bioscience Review, nourishing and protecting your oral microbiome may reduce your risk of multiple diseases. Recent studies show that one approach to reducing the risk of chronic infections such as I think this is supposed to be cavities. I think you left out the T. Cavities, gingivitis, periodontitis, and halitosis is to control the ecology of the oral microbiome instead of completely removing both the harmful and beneficial microorganisms, which is what most of your mouthwashes out there are trying to do. They're trying to get rid of everything, not just the bad, okay? They want to get rid of it all. Yes?
Also, since I was in dentistry, toothpaste does not need to be used every time.
Okay.
Because it destroys the good bacteria also. I mean, if you brush your teeth only twice a day, then don't use it once, one of those times. And the other thing is to always brush your tongue.
Yeah. And going on with this quote from this magazine or this review, this is based on the knowledge that oral diseases are not caused by a single pathogen, but rather by a shift in the homeostasis of the entire microbiota, a process known as dysbiosis. And then he goes on here, Pseudomonadota, I'm not sure what that is, which are present in higher concentrations in the mouth than in the gut, also play an important role in producing short-chain fatty acids and boosting the growth of beneficial gut microbes. This Fusobacteriota represent another prominent type of microbes in the body. While they can help stimulate inflammatory responses to pathogens, they may also drive inflammation and are linked to periodontal disease. He's got references to all of these that I haven't actually looked up every single one of these references. He's got them listed at the end of all of this article. That if you're interested, I can send this article to you and you can look up all of the different references. Then in your esophagus, that's the next step down. From your mouth, it goes to the esophagus. You have 10 million CFUs per milliliter. Firmicutes tend to be particularly abundant in the esophagus. While relatively low in numbers compared to elsewhere in the gastrointestinal tract, firmicutes are useful for helping to break down sugars and carbohydrates from the foods you eat. Interestingly, firmicutes, which are centrally involved in glucose and insulin metabolism, belong to the phylum most adversely affected by the artificial sweetener sucralose. Animal studies suggest that sucralose-altered gut microbiome can be involved in inflammation of the gut and liver as well as cancer. Next is your stomach. There are 1,000 CFUs per milliliter there. Your stomach's low pH levels limit the growth of microbes. But even in this high acid environment, some microorganisms survive. The Actinomycetota tend to be the dominant microbes in the stomach, along with Streptococcus, Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and Lactobacillus. These technical words can get challenging to pronounce. Lactobacillus has also been dubbed a psychobiotic because of its effect on mental health, particularly anxiety and depression. Lactobacillus bacteria found in many fermented foods helps dampen stress responses and prevent depression and anxiety, in part by you modulating your immune system. The small intestines is next. 1,000 CFUs per milliliter up to 100 million CFUs. The concentration of microbes in the small intestine gradually increases, starting with 1,000 in the duodenum, the first part of, which is the first part of the small intestines, and rising to 100,000 in the second part, known as the jejunum. In the third part, the ileum, there's about 100 million. Firmicutes are abundant in the small intestines, but Actinomycetota, which help break down complex carbohydrates and produce B12 and K2 are another dominant species. They also help protect against pathogens. Bacteroides, or whatever, are also found in the small intestine. They also play a role in breaking down complex carbohydrates and producing vitamins, as well as helping to regulate the immune system. The large intestines is next, with up to 1 trillion CFUs per milliliter. Bacteroids, whatever, are the dominant microbe in the large intestines, the area of your body with the highest concentration of bacteria. Bifidobacteria are also present. The composition of these microbes and those elsewhere in your gut are linked to health conditions like obesity and inflammation. As noted in a review published in Nutrients, obese individuals tend to have higher proportions of firmicutes and lactobacillus and lower proportions of bacteroides, and bifidobacterium compared to normal weight individuals. Studies have also linked specific strains to specific health problems. For example, high levels of Bacteroides vulgaris, which is abundant in the human gut, appear strongly associated with inflammation, insulin resistance, and altered metabolism. All three of those come with that when that's high. Low levels of certain bacteria in the Firmicutes phylum, including Blautia and Faecolibacterium, have been linked to the accumulation of trunk fat specifically. So now we're going to talk about your gut-brain axis and the information highway. Gut microbes effect don't only apply to your gastrointestinal tract. They interact with your central nervous system via the microbiota gut-brain axis. It's a two-way information highway that involves neuro, immune, endocrine, and metabolic pathways. By promoting pro-inflammatory cytokines, bacteria may also play a role in damaging the integrity of the microbiota gut-brain axis and the blood-brain barrier. There are also 10 gut microbiota genera with a significant link to Alzheimer's. 6 are negatively associated with Alzheimer's, meaning that they're less common in people with Alzheimer's than those without the disease, and may therefore have a protective effect. The remaining 4 are positively associated with Alzheimer's, meaning that they're more abundant in those with Alzheimer's disease, making them a risk factor for the condition. Specifically, bacteria protective against Alzheimer's include Firmicutes phylum. They go into the Eubacterium, Notatum group, and these other things that I have a hard time pronouncing, as well as from the Actobacterium. They go into that and some other things. It's too hard for me to pronounce these things, but there's, if you are tested and you're high in these, the chances of coming down with Alzheimer's could be a risk factor for you. So it'd be something to check into and try to repopulate your gut so you don't have those as strongly. So, what is hurting your microbial health? Researchers are only beginning to tap the surface when it comes to unveiling the complex relationship microbes have with human health and disease. But it's known that microbial diversity in your gut is a good thing, when decreased diversity in the gut microbiome has been linked to chronic conditions such as obesity and type 2 diabetes. Diversity means we want a bunch of different kinds, not just one kind, okay? We want a bunch of different of the helpful bacteria. Because in your gut, and in all of these things, you have good bacteria and you have bad bacteria. We want to make sure that we have more good bacteria than we have bad bacteria, okay? That's what's important. And if we don't, then it can lead to this obesity and type 2 diabetes. In general, gut microbial diversity decreases with age. But even younger people are being affected now. They're finding it lower and lower all the time. The overuse of antibiotics, elective C-sections, and processed foods have been described as primary factors driving the destruction of our inner ecology. C-section delivery is associated with an increased risk of immune system and metabolic disorders, possibly due to altered microbes. Drastic increases in chronic diseases, including type 1 diabetes, asthma, obesity, gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, inflammatory bowel disease, are all linked to the loss of bacterial diversity in our guts, caused by the overuse of antibiotics. That's a big thing that's leading to a lot of that, and they're really out there using antibiotics. They use antibiotics for all kinds of things. I remember years ago, Dad had seasonal allergies in the winter, and he thought he would have the flu. He'd go into the doctor. The doctor would prescribe antibiotics, and he would get, shortly after, he'd get really sick. And this happened several years in a row. And finally he went into a doctor that says, don't do that. The bacteria, that doesn't help at all with allergies. This is what you've got, is an allergy. And the antibiotics don't do anything, but what it's doing is damaging your kidneys. And that's why you're getting so sick, is your kidneys are affected, and you're getting this flu-like symptoms because of your kidneys. So, I think it was his kidneys. It might have been his liver. It's one of those. Not sure which one. So, constant consumption of whole foods, meanwhile, is linked to higher gut microbial diversity, as is consuming herbs and spices, for instance. But processed foods, which are devoid of fiber needed to feed the healthy microbiome, contain chemicals such as the herbicide glyphosate that also disrupt microbes. From EMFs, what are EMFs? EMFs are the electromagnetic fields from all over, from telephone lines to power lines to cell phones to Wi-Fi. All of those are electromagnetic fields. So that is one thing that's doing this. Air pollution is another one that's disrupting it. Antibacterial soap is another thing. Your microbiome is under constant assault from the world around you. So how do we optimize our gut microbiome? Avoiding antibiotics, including those found in conventionally raised meats, is key to keeping your microbiome health intact. Unprocessed foods, artificial sweeteners, chloridated and fluoridated water, elective C-sections, and antibacterial products are all other culprits that can worsen your microbial health. A healthy gut microbiome depends on the consumption of fermented foods. Okay? How many are familiar with what fermented foods are? Okay? Can you name a couple?
Sauerkraut.
Kefir. Pickles.
Sauerkraut is great. When I had an upset stomach, it worked with upset stomach.
All of those are fermented foods. Okay?
Kimchi.
So, a study assigned 36 adults to consume a diet high in fermented foods or high fiber foods for 10 weeks. Those consuming fermented foods had an increase in microbiome diversity as well as decreases in markers of inflammation. If you do take antibiotics, this is something I had never heard of before. If you do take antibiotics or are looking for another supportive measure for gut health, consider spore-based probiotics or sporebiotics. Has anyone else ever heard of those?
No, but I was advised to take something that had lactobacillus at least and have yogurt if you take antibiotics for any length of time.
Yes.
So I
Okay,
don't know if
before we
that's-
go on with any more of this, I want to talk about that. You hear this all the time. If you take an antibiotic, take some yogurt. What is wrong with the majority of the yogurts out there?
Sugars.
Doesn't matter.
Sugar destroys the microbiome.
Yeah.
And so if you're taking acid and you're taking the good stuff and you're taking the bad stuff at the same time, what's going to happen? It's going to neutralize itself out. It's really not going to do you much good. If you're going to take a good yogurt, which there are some good ones out there, you don't want the sweetened ones. Okay? If you're going to sweeten it with anything, you want to use something that's a good sweetener, a nutritional sweetener, something that is going to be good for you and not
You can make your own, it's not that hard to make.
right. It's really easy to make. And if you're making your own, I've made my own before, and it's not sour like some of that you buy in the store. It's like you don't have to put the sweetener in it. It's good. Just put a little fruit on it or something, and you're good to go. So I had not seen this term spore biotics before, but I looked it up last night and to find out what it was. And I think he's going to explain a little bit here, but if not, I'll come back to that. I had just never heard this term before. These are part of a group of derivatives of the Bacillus microbe and have been shown to dramatically increase your immune tolerance. Spore-based probiotics do not contain any live Bacillus strains, only its spores. The cell wall or protective shell around the DNA and the working mechanism of the DNA. As such, they are not affected by antibiotics and may be able to re-establish your gut microbiome more effectively when taken in conjunction with the antibiotic. In your gut, the Bacillus species also converts sugar into vitamin C, a nutrient well known for its anti-infectious effects. And according to Dr. Dietrich Kleinhardt, a longtime mentor of mine, spore biotics also massively increase reproduction of Acidophilus, Bifidus, and other beneficial microbes in your gut via the electromagnetic messages they send out. This is entirely unique. When you take a regular probiotic, they primarily take care of themselves. Bacillus spores, on the other hand, enhance many other beneficial microbes. Bacillus spores also create 24 different substances that have strong antimicrobial properties. They do not kill indiscriminately the way antibiotics do, as noted by Dr. Klinghardt. Quote, seeding the gut with these things that make it stronger, more resilient towards the offenses we present to it is a huge key to our time. We need to live through this insane time, and we need to use all the tools that give us more resilience, which is for me like a holy war. Resilience means immune tolerance, tolerating the stresses of our time, and any tool that it does that is healthy and doesn't have any side effects is important to have in your tool chest. Spore biotics is one of the major ones. And I went looking up online to see if I could find these. And I don't know, there were several different ones that it pulled up on Amazon type thing. But Dr. Mercola has one, and it's a 30-day supply, because you don't take one a day, a 30-day supply for about $30. It wasn't like a huge expense. Now there was one out there, I don't know anything about the quality. I saw one that was like $60-some, but I don't know anything about that. So I'm just knowing, because that's the first I had ever heard of spore biotics. But that is interesting to know. So one of the things that we've talked about that's very, very beneficial for your gut is fiber. There are two kinds of fiber. One is soluble and one is insoluble. And so I've got just a little definition thingy here to help us understand what's the difference and what is the purpose of each one of them. So, in the Battle of Roughage, which one reigns supreme? It's best known for keeping your intestinal plumbing clear, but did you know that fiber actually has health benefits that go beyond helping you stay regular? Fiber is an important nutrient that comes from plants. It's sometimes called roughage or bulk, says registered dietitian Jillian Culbertson. Fiber comes in two forms, soluble and insoluble. Getting the right amount of both can aid digestion and may even lower your risk for certain chronic diseases. When you eat, your body breaks food down into nutrients it can use, but it can't digest or absorb fiber. It can't, which is actually a good thing. Instead, fiber stays mostly intact for its journey through your body. Soluble fiber dissolves in water and other body fluids. When it does, it forms a gel-like material as it passes through. Once it makes it to the colon, it feeds your gut bacteria, your good gut bacteria. Healthy gut bacteria are linked to a host of health benefits, including some protection against obesity and its related conditions such as diabetes. That was soluble fiber. Insoluble fiber doesn't dissolve in fluids. Instead, it absorbs them and it sticks to other materials to form stool. This process leads to softer, bulkier, and more regular stools. So they both have their things that are important, soluble and insoluble. Both kinds of fibers are essential for your health. They include digestion. Fiber makes stools easier to pass. Regularity means better colorectal health. Heart health. Fiber helps lower cholesterol and may help prevent and control high blood pressure. Cancer. Some studies have linked dietary fiber intake to a lower risk for colorectal cancer and breast cancer. Diabetes. Fiber helps reduce diabetes risk by promoting better blood sugar control. Lifespan. Some scientists have connected eating a high fiber diet to longer life. And weight management, fiber helps you feel fuller longer. So, I'm going to go into the benefits of both of them. Soluble fiber. The gel-like substance that soluble fiber creates in your body reduces your body's ability to absorb fat. It lowers cholesterol and blood sugar levels, and it may reduce heart disease risk. It increases a healthy gut bacteria, which lowers inflammation in the body and helps you digest better. Insoluble fiber helps your body process the waste better and get it out. It improves the bowel health, prevents and treats constipation, reduces your risk of colorectal conditions such as hemorrhoids and diverticulitis. So how can you get more of each of these into your system? Soluble fiber. Some good sources include apples, barley, beans, carrots, citrus, oats, peas, and psyllium can be one that can be used. Reach for these foods when you need a snack, or add them to soups, salads, or other foods. What about insoluble fiber? Good sources are beans, nuts, wheat bran, whole wheat flour, and vegetables such as cauliflower, green beans, potatoes, and carrots, and berries. Since most plants have both forms of fiber, you may get more bang for your buck when you eat the diet rich in vegetables. Culbertson says, breakfast can be a great time to get insoluble fiber through high fiber cereals and oatmeal. You can also use whole wheat flour instead of white flour. That's a better source of getting it. So how much do you need? They're talking about, these are just talking about fiber, they don't divide it up between soluble and insoluble. So they just say here, men 50 and younger need about 38 grams, men older than 50 need about 30 grams, women 50 and younger need about 25 grams, and women over 50 about 21 grams. Check nutrition labels to track how much fiber you're eating, and if you're one of the many Americans who don't get enough, start slowly and work your way up. And I want to, that is so true, to start slowly. You don't just add a whole bunch of it because your system is not used to it. How many know what happens when beans are very high in fiber? If you haven't had beans for a while, and all of a sudden you eat a whole bunch of beans, what's going to happen?
Nothing good.
You're going to have a lot of gas, you're going to have a lot of bloating, you're going to have a lot of smell. All of those things are going to happen because your body wasn't ready for it. It wasn't prepared to do it, and you gave it too much at one time, and it just didn't know what else to do. So start slowly and add them up. If you want to look this list over, I have a list here of different, this is for soluble fiber, some of the things that have a lot of it, and per serving size. It's got a long list, but I'm not going to worry about going into that today. I'm not sure that, well, maybe we have time for it. Another thing besides fiber that I learned several years ago is very important for the gut. You need something, you've heard the term prebiotics? Okay, do you know what prebiotics are? Okay?
It's the food to the probiotic.
Right. It's what feeds the probiotics. Your probiotics are your good bacteria, okay? That's the probiotics. But if they don't have any food, they die, right? They need something to feed them. One of the things that is a good prebiotic for the probiotics is something called resistant starch. Have you heard that term before? You haven't heard that term? Okay. Resistant starch is very important, and I'm going to try to get through as much of this as I can today, and we will see how we go. So what is resistant starch and the best sources for it? Resistant starch are called resistant because they resist being digested in the small intestines. They remain intact to become food for the good flora located in the colon, or the large intestines. Perhaps the most well-known resistant starch sources include things like, some of these you might not have heard. Tiger nuts, that's fairly new to probably a lot of us. Green raw plantains or bananas, and specific foods that have been cooked and cooled, like legumes, grains, and potatoes. Resistant starches can fit into many different diets, including gluten-free, grain-free, paleo, AIP, anti-inflammatory, and more. They're really easy to fit into whatever type of thing you have.
I don't know if I could bite into a cold potato though.
Potato salad.
You have potato salad, don't you?
Salad? Well, I boil for my potato salad.
Yeah, but then you cool them.
That's great.
Okay. Well,
That's what it's talking about. You cook it, then you cool it.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Okay, so there are 4 different types of resistant starch. I did not know this. I just thought resistant starch was resistant starch. But there are 4 different types. So we're going to go into these right now. Number 1 is bound within the fibrous cell walls of certain foods. Whole grain foods, seeds, tiger nuts, and legumes come into category number 1. Category number 2 exists in certain raw foods and goes away when it's heated. These include the type of starch like in green bananas. They're good while it's green. If you cook the bananas, no good, okay? It's also high amylose corn, basmati rice, and raw potatoes, okay? It's there in raw potatoes, but if you heat them up, no. The third type, occurs when certain foods are cooked and then cooled. This includes rice, beans, potatoes. All of those are examples of that. The fourth type is not whole food source. It is a synthetic form. It's chemically modified to make it resistant to digestive enzymes. This is not the one I suggest. I never suggest anything that's chemical or man-made. I like to go to what God made. Always. If I have that choice, I always go there. So, one of these is something called the role of butyrate, and that's probably a new word for most of you. But this will explain it. When good bacteria is in the colon consume resistant starch, they produce a short-chain fatty acid called butyrate. If you want the spelling of that, Sean, it's B-U-T.
Y-R-A-T-E.
Correct, you got it. Important cells exist in the colon that are called T cells. Those are immune cells that are very, very important. And they are fueled by butyrate. T cells provide a layer of defense against pathogens and help strengthen the immune system. T cells decrease as we get older. I'm not going to go through this whole, they have a picture of how the chain goes. It makes sense that feeding T cells is beneficial, especially for some with autoimmune diseases. This is very important for autoimmune diseases. Repeatedly, an abundance of T cells in laboratory rats shows the ability to reduce inflammation and even to protect immune responses. Excess butyrate moves into the bloodstream and benefits insulin levels and liver function too. So, which foods contain these resistant starches? For quick reference, they've got a list of 10 easy-to-eat resistant foods, starch foods at the bottom of the post. And I think I have that here, which I could print out. Yes, I could print it out if you guys want it. So, easy-to-eat ones include green bananas or green plantains. Very green plantains and bananas are easy for most of us to source, and they're a whole food. While these fresh foods are not palatable, green plantain flour and green banana flour can be stirred into water or a smoothie. What do you do with fresh green plantains and bananas? You dehydrate them, and they have a recipe, and then they use them in different things like crackers or fruit leather or different things like that. They're resistant starch when cooked. So these recipes they lose their resistant starch when they're cooked. So dehydrating them and turning them into this flour or whatever to make into things maintains that and keeps it so that it can be used. And then they have a recipe for brownie bite cookies using that kind of thing. Then the third type, which was the third type was one that's cooked and then cooled. Yes.
Quick question, back on green bananas.
Mhm.
So as they ripen, the starch becomes more processable, so to speak?
And so you don't have the resistance.
Okay.
And it turns more into the carbohydrates.
Right.
And you'll see it a lot, especially when they're talking about diets. Don't eat really ripe bananas. Try to stay as green as you can because they're good for getting your protein in, but the farther you get down the chain, they'll still have the potassium. That's what we want, potassium. They still have the potassium, but they get so much carbs that you'll be putting on weight if you're eating a lot of bananas from really ripe. Okay? So you don't want to eat a lot of really ripe bananas. Okay? So this third category is the ones that are cooked and then cooled. And these are ones like rice, beans, oats, and potatoes. Reheating them But cooling, again, allows them to reform. So, examples of prepared foods that contain resistant starch due to retrogradation are potato salad. That's one way you can do it. Sushi rice, cold bean salad, pasta salad, all of those things. They're cooked and then they're cooled. And all of these could likely be dressed in part with things like apple cider vinegar, or vinegar is said to be to assist in the digestion of the resistant starch into
It's
butyrate.
delicious.
What?
You could put balsamic dressing on it, couldn't you?
It would not help it. It would not help with digestion, turning it into butyrate, which you want some butyrate. One reason is that, well, even though it tastes good, one of the reasons it tastes good, balsamic vinegar has sugar in it. Okay? And the other thing it doesn't have is it doesn't have the mother, which is an apple cider, which should be an apple cider vinegar. It's not in all apple cider vinegar. There are some out there that are cooked, and that kills the mother that's in there. And here's something else you want to know. This is new. I'm sure you've heard of Bragg's apple cider vinegar, right? They were really, really, really good until just recently. They were bought out by another company that has nothing to do with nutrition. And I've been hearing reports that there is no more mother in it. You should be able to see stuff at the bottom, and they don't have it. And so there are others out there. You want one that says raw apple cider vinegar.
There's some out there that will even say with the mother.
Yes, and I don't know if Bragg still says that on it. I haven't gotten a new bottle lately. My bottles, I got one left that I bought several years ago. I bought a case, so I've had it for a while. I bought 2 cases of, one was Bragg's, one was another one. I couldn't find one, so I bought another case, and then I also found the other case in my hand. Wow, I got apple cider vinegar for a while. So, okay. It's really good in shampoo. It helps with the dandruff. It helps all of that stuff.
And just so Mary Claire said,
I just started using that.
Yeah, it's very, very good.
It's
Yes.
very good.
They used to tell you to rinse your hair with apple cider vinegar. It would bring out the red tones in your hair.
Yeah, well,
There's no red a long time ago.
just gray.
So I really don't know. So then they give some other ideas of, waffles and oatmeal cookies and hummus and things like that. That could be things that you could make that would have this. So there's some other ones here that are this type 3 that are cooked and then reheated. Like refried beans, chili made ahead of time, chilled and then reheated. Cooked al dente pasta, put in the fridge and then reheated briefly in your water or whatever, reheating it. Reheating mashed potatoes, making smashed potatoes. And leftovers in general, because they've been cooled and then reheated. Avoid processed sources of resistant starch. This would be that number 4, I think. Surprisingly, most advocates for increasing resistant starch in one's daily diet originally recommended a factory-made food. Bob's Red Mill potato starch, working up to 2 to 4 tablespoons a day. I don't agree with that approach, it says here. The goal for restored health involves getting away from factory-made foods and having a whole food diet. Potato starch may feed good bacteria, but there are plenty of whole foods that do that too. What potatoes does Bob use to make that starch? Hint, they're not organic, and potatoes often make the dirty dozen list of contaminated foods. So that's one reason for not using that. Other sources of resistant starch are things like cassava flour. I haven't used much. I've got some sitting on my shelf, but I haven't yet used it. That's one. You can use that in baked goods, muffins, cookies, different things like that. Tiger nuts, I haven't used that either. Jerusalem artichokes is another one. Jerusalem artichokes, if I'm thinking right, they're not an artichoke. They look like a potato. Okay, and I haven't seen them in the stores recently, but I used to be able to get them in the grocery store, and they are a good resistant starch. They help feed the good bacteria, but eating too much can cause gas and stuff like that. If you're getting too much, they can be very gassy and stuff like that. But they taste a lot like potatoes, but they're called a Jerusalem artichoke. How they came up with that name, I'll never know. But they grow. I used to have one of my chiropractors used to grow them in his garden. He loved them. And he'd grow them in his garden. They're root, just like a potato. And he just
They
grew
look
them.
like a Scottish thistle too. They're really pretty.
I don't know what Scottish.
No, that's a regular artichoke.
Yeah, that's regular. That's not Jerusalem
The
artichokes.
flower looks
Well,
like
on this one farm at a Scottish festival, they were growing Jerusalem artichokes, and it looks like we thought it was a Scottish thistle.
I don't know what it looks like on top because they don't harvest the top.
I know,
harvest the
it's you know how Scottish thistle looks when it, okay.
I know what thistle looks like. I don't know about Scottish thistle. Okay. So one key thing is start slowly. As with the soluble fiber, with this you start slowly too. And just increase slowly over time. So for anyone detoxing, for example, it might not be ideal right at the time if you're trying to get stuff out. Just wait. It stirs up so much action in the colon that it recirculates toxins as they're trying to exit if you're getting too much of that stirred up. So you might want to wait a while or start very slowly. Those on the GAPS diet should not eat these or any starches at all. If total recovery is expected, try resistant starch slowly. In the meantime, GAPS patients can enjoy probiotic foods like leeks and onions, not cooked too long, to protect the prebiotic qualities that are also in them. Fermented asparagus is another good GAPS diet option.
What is a GAP diet?
What's it stands? It's an elimination diet where people are trying to figure out what they're allergic to. Okay? So they eliminate a whole bunch of things and then they add one at a time to see if they react. And if they're okay with that, then they'll add another one. And they'll keep going until they find what they react to, and they'll go, oh, that's what I'm allergic to. And they'll get rid of that one. Okay? That's kind of what they do. It's an elimination type diet. Okay, so I could print this out if someone wants it. 10 easy to eat resistant starch foods would be cooked and cooled rice, cooked and cooled beans, cooked and cooled potatoes, any tiger nut flour recipe, green bean banana flour, cassava flour, pasta salad or leftover pasta, green plantain treats, leftover oatmeal chilled and made into something, chilled waffles and breads made with grains or beans. So if you cook a waffle, instead of eating it right away, you cool it and then you eat it, heat it up and eat it later, like leftover waffles. They have the resistant starch in that would not be in there when they're first made. So
Tiger nuts taste like peanuts.
tastes like peanuts. Oh, if you like peanuts, which we know some who do, then something like it.
Cindy,
And yes.
I just had a question about the plantains. I'd always heard that they could be poisonous to people if you don't cook them first. Had you heard that?
I have not heard that. However, there are so many different kinds of plantains.
Okay. That's
They're not common in this country.
no.
you know, they're brought in, and I always get leery of stuff that are brought in from other places because you don't know what they've done to them before they've gotten here.
I think
And-
people in the Caribbean use
Yes.
them a lot. And I heard that. Now, I don't know if that is a blanket, all plantains are like that.
I wouldn't think so because here they're highly recommending them, so I don't think all plantains would be that way.
Right.
There is a plantain herb too, and it grows around here.
Oh.
And the seed part of it is what they made Metamucil.
Oh.
So it would be
Okay.
there's broadleaf plantain and narrowleaf plantain. And you can look it up and look at a good foraging video. The narrowleaf is what I see most here. And you can tell because it has really long sword type leaves, and there is the veins go vertically this way, you know, on the leaf, which is a little bit different and identifying factor. And then it sends up a stalk, and then it has a little flower thing that kind of gets fuzzy. I mean, you will see it as a weed everywhere.
Interesting.
I had never known that.
I pulled out my share of it.
Good. Okay, any other questions before we end for today? Okay, let's close with a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you that you have made our bodies so amazing, and our gut is one of those big things that does so many things, and our guts are bombarded more and more by all the different chemicals out there in our world, and whether they're coming to us through our food, or through the air, through the electromagnetic stuff, all of these things, it's coming in, and our ancestors didn't have that they had to contend with, but we do. And because of this, our guts are really dealing with a lot of issues because of all of the stuff that they're being bombarded with. Thank you that you have provided foods and things that we can do to help protect those. And I just thank you as we go our way that you'll help us to find some of these things that can help restore the microbiota of our guts, that we can restore our health and be about the business that you would have us be about. Thank you so much for these things now. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, next week is our last week of Bible study. After that, I am going to be doing another one. Sean had asked me to do something on yeah, that's it, fasting. On fasting. And I started digging into it, and there is so much material out there. And Kathy had also told me she didn't want to continue with Bible study, teaching Bible study, and I thought, what am I going to do? So I'm looking at doing a Bible study and talk about, because the Bible has so much to say about fasting, different kinds of fasts, all kinds of things. So I'm looking at taking and doing what the Bible has to say about fasting for the Bible study, and then cover some of the other topics that the Bible doesn't cover, along with some of these other nutrition classes that we're doing. It won't be all on fasting. I'll do one or two of them on fasting, but cover topics that the Bible doesn't cover, like are there reasons you should not fast? How do you get ready? How do you prepare for a fast? How do you come off of a fast? What are the different kinds of fasts? What happens to your body when you fast on these different kinds of fasts? All of those I'll cover in the nutrition stuff and leave what the Bible says for the Bible study. So that's my plan. Okay? I'm not sure if we will start the week after. I need to have some time to go through and look at my stuff to see how much material I have and how many weeks it's going to take. If I think it's going to take us 8 weeks, then we will start immediately after Bible study. So that would be the second week of February. If, I think we can do it in less than eight. Yeah, that one. March. If I think we need less than 8 weeks, then we will take a break. But it's not a week that we're typically needing a break. It's before the men's retreat, not after. It's not during spring break when company can be coming and things like that. So I'm not sure that we will really take a break between the classes. We might start and then take a break later. I don't know.
And are we still scheduled for a ladies' fellowship April 13th?
Yes.
Okay.
At this point, we are. Okay? Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.